Hi, I'm Bonney. I'm well known for my work in men and boys health and mental health here in Australia and around the world, both in advocacy, private practice and workplace. And today I'm speaking on the online prosperity show. And what can help to learn or hope to learn today is a lot about resilience, accountability, responsibility for self, and some frameworks of self-management that could be really useful in bringing those things to life. And also a lot through the great questions from Prosper about my life. So thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another enlightening episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. And today, we've got a guest whose journey is as inspiring as it is impactful. Now, Ray, how are you doing today?
Thank you, Prosper, and thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast. I mentioned to you off air, it's so lovely to have the tables turned and to be indulged in such a way, so thank you very much. For me today, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, so today is about 38 degrees. It's very, very hot, and I have just spent the day with my 18-month old granddaughter, so I'm very blessed feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah, now I was trying to keep the fans and the aircon going, but I think Melbourne has outdone herself today. And I think there's 2 more days left of this, from what I hear. And
we've already had a couple. So, but we love Melbourne because we can have all the seasons in one day. So we never have to put our wardrobe away.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you for bracing the heat and coming to join me on the show today. But I've got a question for you, Ray. What does it feel like being you today?
I feel exhausted, having been with an 18-month-old, and it's quite a change in my brain as well. I spend time. We look after each other on Mondays. So I carve out, I work 7 days a week pretty much, but Mondays I carve out to go on adventures with my granddaughter because I think that I'm very conscious of living very intentionally. And intentionally with my granddaughter means that I can show her all of the wonderful things that I have collected, which I guess we're going to speak about today. In life, and it's such a privilege to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
So I'm feeling great.
And thank you so much for sharing such a heartfelt sentiment. And for those that are watching right now, you might be wondering, why is this so important for Ray? Because I want you to imagine having lived home and school at a tender age of 15 due to family violence. And that was a daunting start that could have led, Ray down many dark paths. Yet our guest actually transformed this adversity into a beacon of hope for others. And now Ray is a qualified counselor, trained in Rogerian theory, and she's dedicated over a decade to developing and delivering workplace mental health and well-being programs, particularly in high-risk male-dominated industries. And her unique approach just combines authenticity, genuineness, and empathy, which creates safe spaces for individuals to confront and navigate their mental health challenges. Now, she's also the first female board member and vice president of the Australian Men's Health Forum, and she's also a board member of the Global Action on Men's Health. So Ray's commitment to inspiring change in men's health is both groundbreaking and heartfelt. And today we're celebrating two things, actually. I mean, besides you having spent the day with your grandchild there, it's 2 days since you've been sober, and also 2 years, sorry, since you've been sober.
I was going to say, yeah. I'd still be drunk if it
The
was two
heat,
days.
we spoke about the heat ray, but it's burned, it's fried my brain. So it's congratulations. It's 2 years since you've been sober, and also you're celebrating something else again today. 2 years on the council, right?
At Global Action on Men's Health, yeah, 2 years there as well.
Absolutely.
LinkedIn told me that, or everybody who is congratulating me told that this morning. So
Great stuff. So today is a very, formidable day for you, especially knowing who you've been, where you've come from, and exactly who you are. Helping others to be, do, and have a happier existence. Now, your journey began at a significant age, and you had significant personal challenges. Can you maybe share with us what life was like in the lead up for you leaving home and school at 15?
thank you for asking. Uh, Look, it's something that I think a lot of people interpret as a suffering, struggling, time that you talked about dark paths and things like that. I tend to think the things I'm grateful for most is from the moment I could ever remember, I had an absolute curiosity and inquisitiveness around people. Could never get enough of them. Of why I was one of those why childs, why, but why. And I did grow up in an environment that was not conducive to my good health, safety, and well-being. It just was not aligned with me mentally, physically, or emotionally, or spiritually in any way at all. And that was very, very difficult to grow up in that environment. I'm very respectful of all the other people that were in that environment, that perhaps they didn't share the same experience as I did, but I certainly did. And that caused me to, I was very aware that I had a very naturally strong resilience and drive inside of me, and that drive inside of me decided that that was not the life that I wanted to continue. And for whatever happened to help me, I was able to leave home, and I was asked to leave school at quite a young age, as you said, around 15. I was very fortunate that I got myself into employment straight away, and the organisation was a local bookshop actually, who provided me with an environment, the first environment I really felt of safety, security, objective perspective, and safety, of course, but most of all, they gave me a reason to live because they cared. And I all of a sudden had this purpose in life. And I love working. Working is not hard for me. People talk about hard work. I get a lot of joy out of applying myself to work. And I guess, I was fortunate also to be born with a bit of a brain as well. So I'm a quick learner. And before long, that bookshop told me that I had to leave because I was destined for greater things. And that sort of spurred me on to, I landed myself quite a fancy job in quite a prominent investment bank in the city of Melbourne, and that put me in front of politicians and country's decision makers, where I was way out of my depth, way out of my depth, but I learned then that I also had a voice, and had a voice that was quite persuasive, and also I could sell myself into just about anything and make it up as I go, but then also have the aptitude to pull it off. So that was sort of, in those very early years, I was very grateful that early start in life that didn't serve me well was that sort of trauma informed approach to life was really, really helpful. But in the home that I grew up in, men were perpetrators of violence there. And again, when I left school and home, I had this really strong idea or feeling that what happened to them to make them like that. I didn't get a feeling that something had happened to me. It was more that stuff had happened around me that's really, really significantly affected me. But there was something that had happened with them that was not within their emotional or physical control. And I wasn't, able to articulate it at such a young age, but the feeling was definitely there. And there was a curiosity around why men get such a really, really hard, rough end of the stick.
Mm.
And I had great experiences with men also in those early years. Very prominent footballer here in Melbourne who was quite young at the time. I would write him letters every day and he would write back to me. Men in the workplace, white Australian men have always been my biggest supporters because I guess I work hard. I've never felt discriminated against or harassed or anything, that unfortunately many women report. But working in mostly male workplaces, I've never really felt that at all. In fact, quite the opposite, a lot of care and respect. And, I owe a lot of where I am today to those men who really played that role in supporting and encouraging and helping inspire my vision to get ahead.
Right.
So
Thank you
just,
so much. Yeah, thank you so much for taking us through all of that. But you see, you paint a picture of a young girl that is living in a world that does not fit them. Now, was this an observation that was just you observing this, or were there other people that were also sharing this sort of sentiments with you?
Thank you for asking that. I don't think I could articulate that at the time or even know, but I know that upon reflection, I really felt that. And I like the way that you said, things didn't fit with me. And I think I was always trying to fit with other things. So coming out of home and school, I did, form, remote romantic relationships with men, and they never worked out. I was very mentally affected by what had happened around me. And again, we weren't talking about mental health back then. So I had a lot of trouble regulating my emotions, and that in relationships made me very violent. And, when we talk about violence against men, we forget that also women, feel those levels of pain where they also perpetrate violence. And there was no help for me, obviously, for that behaviour. And it was a really, really difficult time to try and navigate out of that because, again, I knew that my relationships weren't working out because of me. And I remember a stage in my life, in my early stages thinking, okay, if I'm the common denominator in everything not working out in my relationships, I need to do something about that if I want that to change. But then I also had this, fantasy or just this image of a family that I wanted to build myself, which anyone that's listening in that ever watched the Brady Bunch, that was it. Um, and so that's so unrealistic to try and head for that. But I really tried to find men I could go, well, you look amazing. If only I could change everything about you and make you into my Brady Bunch fantasy. So that wasn't working either. And also, I was using alcohol to manage, or well, to not manage my emotions and not manage my feelings and not manage those really, really sharp feelings of pain that were with me all the time. It was very handy substance to get me through all those years, and I certainly don't have any misgivings or regret that was with me, because I'm pretty sure that if I didn't have that, I might not be here today.
Right. And thank you so much for taking us on that sort of journey. Now, as a kid in that sort of environment with that sort of exposure, you suck up everything like a sponge and you are obviously impressionable. But were they people that you would have seen around that at least gave you hope? You did mention the footballer, that was sort of writing letters and things like that. Were there many of those, exchanges that you created, or was it just restricted to just famous people?
He was one. He was the only one during that time. You know, in that environment that I lived, it was very restrictive and limited. There was a lot of control, so there was not a lot of ability to go outside of that for support. Um, Hence, you know, leaving was the only way that I probably felt that I was going to survive that.
Mhm. And with the escape that you managed to make at age sort of 15, were there any repercussions to what you were leaving, or was there some sort of um, consequences to that?
No, no consequences in that, you know, it was very confusing, and I think it's taken me a long time to sort of reconcile in my mind how you navigate the guilt and shame that you feel for, you know, leaving parents or siblings and things like that. But then, you know, over the years, there would be attempts at reconciliation or understanding, or which I always felt that I was always just compromising myself. Never worked. Only further probably traumatized me. So
Mm.
there's a lot, you know, anyone listening in, who's sort of resonating with what I'm saying, you know, abandonment, attachment theory, abandonment issues, they're all things that, you know, you read about, and very, very, you know, resonant in some of my behaviours that I've experienced during my life,
Absolutely. But you went
as
on,
outcomes.
and got this fancy job in the investment banking sector. What sort of people were you being exposed to now, and how did that sort of reflect on the past that you had come from?
Well, it was very male, mostly male workplaces. So if you imagine stockbroking back in the 80s, it was full on. It was a lot of testosterone. It was terrifying for a young girl in that space, because even though there's a very confident, outspoken side of me, the other side of me is extremely shy and sensitive. So I really had to push myself through that. And, you know, I was determined. I was determined to overcome my fears. I was determined to overcome my shyness and my trepidation. And it really worked well for me, but it did take some time. But learning as well, I was learning amongst really, really smart people, economists mainly, people who are, yeah, really intelligent, people who also bordered on a bit of philosophy as well about life, and things that I'd not really been exposed to before. Even etiquette, because I'd not be like, when I left school and home, I could barely string a sentence together. I had to start reading the dictionary, so I would learn a word every day. To build my vocabulary. And even now, when I'm public speaking, I'll go to say something and go, blank, I don't have a word for that. So there's a lot of words in the English language that I still don't know. But, you know, I spent a lot of time self-teaching, and I do to this day as well. One of my greatest joys is self-learning from others. So, yeah, those early days were wonderful and so rich in terms of culture and learning about culture, and I loved, you know, I learned that I loved dining, and I loved food and restaurants and clothes and all these things I had never imagined that would be accessible to me.
Absolutely. Would that have been because that hadn't been available on your growth? Or, now that you've got the opportunity, you are now exposing yourself to the things that would not have been present at a time when you would have maybe enjoyed them with other people too.
You know, I was that kind of thoughtful about, you know, what I'd missed out of my childhood, because, you know, you only have that perspective. And, you know, when it certainly didn't go without things. Education, probably, I would be something that I felt that I really missed out on. And that's not just education in school, that's being educated and inspired by people around you. But, as I pushed off, I really felt that sense of responsibility and accountability for my life. And it's something I talk a lot about now with people is, how we do take that responsibility and accountability for how we live. And I think that naturally just burned brightly in me. How I was going to live was something that was really important to me. For example, every single year since I left, I would celebrate my own birthday. I wouldn't wait for somebody to have a party for me or, ring me up. Every year I would invite all of my friends to a birthday party and I would host it because I knew that then I would always be celebrating that I would have another year and another year where I had, I lived. And I really did live. I really did. I started traveling at a really young age. I went to Bali, I think, when I was 16 on my own. And then I traveled to Europe when I was about 17. And then when I was about 21 or 22, I just got a one-way ticket to Athens and just threw myself into the world and ran around just exploring. And it really defined a lot about me and gave me so much confidence in my ability, again, to live. And what I mean by living, I don't mean by staying alive. I mean by actually
Going
living.
Living and really exploring life. Now, you were exposed to the world, well, at such a young age. And what was that like for you? Because so many people only experience life when they've worked and it's like a deserved break, whereas you're using this as somewhat of a rite of passage at that particular time when you were doing it.
Oh, look, to this day, I love an adventure. I have, fast forward, my oldest is 30, my next one is about to turn 27, and my youngest is 16, and I always have them on adventures. One lives in London, so there's a place to visit. So from having kids as well, that was just another opportunity to create moments in life that were adventurous and exploratory. So I've never lost my fascination, my intense fascination for people, nor have I lost my intense fascination with the world and things in it and its beauty.
Absolutely. But one of the things that you got really, really fascinated about was men's health, which you then took on to another level. What led you to specialize in men's health, particularly in high risk male dominated industries?
Well, I guess that's a bit of a fast forward. If I go through, raising children, I raised my children alone. They have amazing dads, by the way, but I raised them pretty much on my own. So I knew for me to enter into higher education, I had to wait to a time where I could create space for myself to do that properly. So I was able to get myself a really good career that paid pretty well. So I was able to buy a house and get safety and security for my family, and eventually went to university when I was about 37, 38. So I knew I wanted to study Rogerian theory. Always had a fascination for people, but also for men as well. Men really, really had me curious, not only because I like them, but also because I could really see, not only from my own childhood, but from experience of life, that by not taking care of men's health, it was affecting everybody, especially suicide being such a significant factor in men's health, that when men kill themselves, they leave everybody. So for that fact, children, wives, partners, parents, they leave everybody. So then, you start sort of considering it through that lens, and then, always reflecting back to my own life to think about not how to fix that, but how do we get upstream and raise boys in a way that they're not in so much pain, that they're inflicting pain on other people. that seemed really obvious to me. So there were all these things. I mean, women's health is one thing. And I think the feminist movement, first wave, amazing, because without that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here myself today and have the rights that I have. So I'm very, very proud of what women did back in the day to get rights. And it wasn't even that long ago, really. But I think that I can see the same thing can happen for men if they're able to advocate for themselves properly. So that those sorts of themes, I thought, yeah, there's really something we can do here that's going to affect everybody in a really good way. So that's when I'd finished university, got my degree. I started up in business myself. So I started a small practice, whilst I was also developing a framework that I was going to take out to the world around mental health. So I very deliberately collected and engaged myself with different organisations, institutions, like the Australian Men's Health Forum. Here in Australia, Beyond Blue, they're a big mental health charity. So I was very fortunate to do work on their world first research into the state of mental health in Australian workplaces here. So I gathered that piece of research that now I sort of had evidence-based information that I could present. So over the last, 15, 16 years, I've really carved a really niche place in Australian workplaces for myself, which is focused on mostly male workplaces, not exclusively male, because I work with women as well. And then to the side of that in advocacy with the Australian Men's Health Forum and Beyond Blue and Global Action on Men's Health, and then public speaking. I speak all over the world about mental health and men's health, sometimes telling my own story. And yeah, private practice as well. Private practice is something I generally do on weekends. And yeah, I have a radio show as well. So the radio show is great. It's a great platform where I speak mostly to men about, their stories to take to the world. So there's a few things there that sort of make it's all the same thing with lots of different touch points.
Absolutely. But obviously, fish don't see the water that they swim in, and neither can people see the air that they breathe. But from what I'm hearing, the men are hurting.
Well, that's subjective because we don't know what they're feeling. I mean, from where I sit, I would never help a person, and I would never give advice to a person, and I would never claim to know anything about a person. They're the things that I really, really hold true inside myself. So, I understand that people attach themselves to those feelings, but for me, certainly not.
Absolutely. What are some of the things that present to you when it comes to men or boys' health, mental health, so to speak, so that people can be able to sport it in the wild, so to say?
Well, it's a good question. It came up the other day, just sort of generally about how men feel. And there's the assumption that, men are angry and get angry. And I think they do. But when I'm working with a man who has been labelled as angry, I can pretty much get to the point where we're dealing with pain. And when we realise that it's pain and find out where the pain is coming from or where it was caused, many times it was caused in childhood. And there are so many things for boys that we don't recognise, support, or have any policy for, or any framework for, like sexual assault towards boys, for example, is something that's huge. Has nothing. The shame, the guilt, the stigma around that, on top of no support. Boys that get really, really hurt and shamed grow into really angry men because they're in so much pain. So, for me, those things, they're not easy to fix, but certainly by recognising them and creating space for them and creating conversations for them is going to be the thing that eventually evolves into change. Quite often when I'm speaking like this, people will ask me not to speak about that in particular because people don't want to hear it. It's a bit it's a bit yuck, it's a bit unpalatable, it's not nice. Or it's disbelieved. Violence against men is generally disbelieved.
Mm. But what's your take on it all? I mean, that's what society wants to believe, but what is the truth in that?
Well, I mean, truth is something, again, that I'm not a seeker of, but I think we have enough evidence to suggest uh, that men also experience violence, that there's enough evidence around to talk about boys being hurt and in pain and growing into angry men. There's no solution to it apart from, I'm very wedded to this work because I know that in my lifetime probably the change won't happen, and I don't expect that, but I do want to be putting down the footprints like this, and I thank you again for allowing me space to share these thoughts, because if one person listens to this and goes, wow, I never thought of it like that, and tells another 10 people, that's when we can slowly start turning the tide. I mean, you even see it in things like fathering. Back in the day where dads literally did go to work and their kids didn't see them. Now we have, organisations with paternity leave, and we have so much, not nearly enough, but we have got so much more in the world that supports dads. Much of the work that I do is to uncover things like paternal postnatal depression, which kills men, but no one really wants to talk about that or recognise that as an issue. So there's lots of things that are moving slowly and have come a long way, and women had to do the same thing. In terms of their or our issues and rights as well. I
Mm.
think we can learn a lot from the women's movement.
Absolutely. I don't know. I think it's one of those things that I heard when I came to Australia, Ray, and it's something that really bugs me. Sometimes I always wonder what they mean. Every time somebody has something going on in their life, you just hear the statement, "She'll be all right, mate," and you just wonder, is that how everybody figures out life, or are you finding that maybe the conversation is changing now that most of these things are now sort of out in the open?
Well, you're so right, and I think you go to any country of the world and they'll have the equivalent of "she'll be right." And my favourite one is acting out the Australian conversation. It's like, "Prosper, how you going, mate? Yeah, good." That's it. That's the whole conversation. So we miss it. And if I go back to the first time I experienced that, I was at school. And I was still at school, and a teacher recognised that there was something going on for me and assumed that I was taking drugs or something like that, because my behaviour at school was pretty terrible. I was a bully. I was upset. I didn't behave well towards teachers or kids. And so he kept me after class and he asked me that question. He said, my name is actually Raylene. That's my full name. It's my stage name. And he said, "Raylene, are you taking drugs?" And I said, "No," but I thought to myself, just ask me another question, another 10. You've identified that there's something going on for me. So now's your chance to hold me in this space and give me that confidence to tell you what's happening to me at home. But he never asked me that. So I left that classroom, and a couple of weeks later I was expelled from high school. But it's always in my mind when now I have this question, what does it feel like being you today, replacing? Well, a person can probably describe that to you or not, because how are you? Yeah, good. What does it feel like being you? Well, I'm really hot at the moment. And you go, well, that makes sense because you're in Melbourne. What else? And you go, oh, well, actually, I feel like, I've got a bit of a headache. When did that start? We have this line of questioning now where we can just keep on opening up a line of inquiry. We just got to
Mm,
get used to it, because we don't really have permission to tell people how we feel, because really nobody wants to hear it. They
absolutely.
really don't. And I think we've
Absolutely.
got to get away from this bullshit that, there's, people are there, they're listening, they're there to help. They're actually not. Um, Unless you're paid to do it, they're not.
All
So we've got to
right.
find different people. That's why I say I never help people and I don't give advice, because help generally, like people who you listen to who say, I just want to help and I'm trying to help this person at work and they just won't listen to me, so I keep on helping. My question to them would be, well, what's going on inside of you that you feel this need to help and fix somebody else? Because in my work, listening is the key. Because when you're listening, you're validating and you're creating space for somebody to actually explore their own feelings. And when I'm trying to help you, I'm telling you to do things, prosper. You need to stop smoking. You need to stop drinking. You need to stop staying at home and playing video games. You just get sucked into this vortex. Whereas when I'm just listening to you and reflecting what you're saying back to me, then you're just creating space for yourself to reflect on your own self.
You see, you've actually brought up an interesting factor there, because our society always wants to fix things. You know, if something is not working, we fix it. All right, there's a solution to that. There's an answer to that. Maybe can you walk us through the process of developing something like that, maybe in a workplace environment, because you do that, you do workplace health programs, right? And half of the time people just want to fix someone. If they come to fix, then that person gets fired. But that person could have just been like you just wanted somebody to ask you maybe 5 more questions so that that space is created. What are some of the key elements to ensure that these mental health programs are effective, especially in the workplace?
Well, I guess when you talk about programs, they all have to be bespoke, because, again, an environment that contains people is always going to be a moving feast. It's never going to be a fixed asset. And it's like, men, the world still sees men as a being that needs to be fixed. We just need to fix men. And if we just fixed men, we'll fix violence and we'll fix suicide and we'll fix all of those things. Not possible. But I was really fortunate. It dawned on me many years ago. I was getting on a flight, a very small flight to a very small place in Australia to go and address men out in the gas and oil field. And I was getting on this plane, and there was a lady and a man getting on with me, and they had 2 children who were really, really agitated. And I said to the mum and dad, I said, hey, let the kids sit next to me because I'm pretty cool with kids. And they were just like, nah, they didn't want to have anything to do with me. Anyway, we were getting on the plane, and the kids were still getting more agitated. And I sat next to the mum and one of the kids, and she pulled out an iPad out of her bag and she gave it to the child. And he said, where are my headphones? I don't have any headphones. And she didn't have any, but I had some. So I said, here, take mine. And she just snatched them. She didn't say thank you. She just took them. But I thought, that's not about me. So I sat that out. So once we were airborne, she turned to me and she said, oh, I'm so sorry about before. She said, my son, he's only 8 and he's got Tourette's, borderline personality disorder, ADHD. What this kid didn't have isn't in the DSM. And I went, wow. I said, what is it like being his mum? And she said, oh, it's not so bad, but you just caught him on a day when he wasn't so good. And then she asked me the question. She said, do you know much about mental health? And I chose that moment to go, nah, but I do live with chronic anxiety and depression and, the whole kit and caboodle. And that's when she asked me this question, right? She said to me, what does it feel like being you? And I realised at that moment, nobody in my whole personal or professional life had ever asked me what it felt like being me. Every therapist I'd ever been to wanted to know who did it to me, how long it happened for, what my injuries were, what medication I'm taking for it, when I'm going to recover, blah, blah, blah. Only things that only ever further shamed and humiliated me and just made me feel just horrible. All of a sudden, she asked me what it felt like being me, and I was telling her. And I realised also in that moment I'd never told anyone what it felt like being me, and it was the most incredible experience of my life. And when I got to my motel room that night at a place called Griffith here in Australia, I certainly wasn't going out, but I developed my first self-management plan, and it's a framework of accountability. And I started with, what are my major challenges? And at that time, it was a long time ago, I don't sleep, but I have to get up and do this stuff every day, so I need energy. I live with anxiety, I live with depression, I have an eating disorder, I have an alcohol dependency. So they were all my challenges. So I wrote they were my main challenges at the time. And next to those challenges, I wrote down how they made me feel. So depression and anxiety, well, they made me feel frustrated because I couldn't, if anxiety and depression came to get me, it was really hard for me to work, and I needed to work and I loved to work. Sleep, I needed sleep because I needed energy, and I knew that that probably wasn't going to last me that many years just operating on a few hours of sleep. Eating disorder is really debilitating. You don't want to let that get hold of you. But if anxiety and depression come into play, that's more likely going to arc that one up. And then you've got alcohol, which you think helps everything, but it doesn't. And that just makes you feel terrified in that dependency. So you've got that stable of things. And then the other part of the framework is, well, what am I doing about this? What am I actually doing about this? So things like, I wrote down that I don't deal with people who make me feel really bad. So I just stay away. I'm not rude. I'm not unkind. I keep a respectful distance from people that don't make me feel good. I exercise. I pay attention to my health. I have to be rigorous with my eating plan because I just have to. With an eating disorder, you have to be just scrupulous with that. So I wrote down all the things that I needed to do to take responsibility for myself. And then underneath, I built an infrastructure of things that actually help me do that, because I can't do it alone. So things like the radio community. I love radio. Radio is really, really cool. So I have a whole community of radio people and working in radio that I love. My family are amazing. We're an incredibly close family. We're quirky. As I said, we do lots of adventures. I do a bit of acting on the side as well, which is really, really fun. It's a way to express myself. So I've got an infrastructure underneath also that I take responsibility for building. So that's the self-management plan that I built out of that conversation.
Wow.
With that woman.
Absolutely.
God bless her. I've no idea where she is. Hopefully one day she hears this story and says, that was me.
Absolutely. I mean, there are some people that we come across in life that, they're just there to really guide us and show us exactly where it is that we need to be. What does it feel like being you today?
Being you. Well, I put today on the end. She didn't say that. I put today on the end to reinforce that each day is different. Any experience that we have will colour in the next moment and the next moment. So we can never, if you won the lottery right now, you're probably just going to push end on this and go. Probably not, but, but a lot of things can just change in a moment. And, I was travelling overseas recently and, I had a moment that, changed very dramatically for me. And without that self-management plan and I have also a support circles that I heavily weigh on, where when things change in your life, where do you go? Because if you don't have a plan, you're really, really vulnerable. So
yeah. And I quite like the journey that you then took pretty much after that, because I think you then doubled down on your career, and also congratulations on reaching 2 years of sobriety. I mean, you did mention it was a big issue in how you were living at that particular time. Now, how has that sort of personal achievement now impacted, first of all, your perspective and approach to the work you're doing now?
I don't think it's changed it really. It makes me more effective when I'm working with people who have addiction issues. I've got a perspective on it. Certainly not, my experience is not something that I would impose on anybody, but, empathy is built out of insight into things. So, and also some of the tools that I used my purpose wasn't to achieve sobriety. My purpose was to actually live with the stuff that caused me to drink. Different thing. I was not about stopping drinking. I was about actually living with the stuff. So that is that's a flip around for most people, because people will congratulate me on not drinking. No one ever thinks to congratulate me on living with the stuff. That's really painful.
Right. So with the drinking gone, did that stuff leave, or is that still a work in progress?
Oh my God, it's there every day. It's horrible. It takes a lot of work, and it's a very deliberate and conscious effort every single day to wake up to it and manage it. And you find different ways to manage. So I'm my routine is really, really strong. I put good food into myself. Honey is something that I've got two beekeepers in my neighbourhood now that I use to get real honey from, and that's such a joy. It's something I wake up to every day that brings me literal joy and health. And also, the birth of my grandchild also was, coincided with my decision as well, in that what sort of grandparent did I want to be. And again, in terms of my drinking, I was not a falling down drunk person. But by the same token, I wanted to be able to be there at the drop of a hat any moment in my daughter's life as a mother, and for my granddaughter as well. So that involves no alcohol.
Absolutely. And well, I think they are the luckiest people to have had such, a transformative example who is a role model, which, from what you say, was a lot of work in the making. Now, for those that are watching this and they're sort of resonating with your story and would maybe want to find out more or learn more or maybe just connect with you, what would be the best way that they can do that, right?
Well, LinkedIn is one of my favourite platforms, and also my website. So it's www.raybonney.au. So it's just my name. Everything. If you just look up my name, you can find my podcast. Well, I make my radio shows into podcasts. Actually, another really big achievement that just happened was I was awarded an Order of Australia last week on Australia Day, which is a really big deal here in Australia. It's a significant award for my work in men's health and mental health. So,
congratulations! I mean, that
yeah.
alone is something we should have celebrated all this while, but you saved the best for last, right? So,
Well, it's still a little bit surreal, because when I was overseas, I returned and I'd had a call from the Attorney General's office here, and thought, oh, I wonder what's up there. And I rang them back and they said, oh, we've been chasing you for a few months about your Order of Australia. And I said, oh, well, who am I nominating? And they said, no, it's you. I went, no, 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 no. It couldn't be me. It must be somebody else. And they took a lot of convincing for me to accept that. But even then, between November and last week, I really wasn't convinced that it was a thing. And then it was announced, and I've never had so much attention in my entire life, and it's been really overwhelming. But also, I'm able to feel a great sense of pride in the achievement of how hard I've worked, but also it's a real nod to the men's health sector as well, that it's getting place, it's getting recognition at such a high level. So
absolutely. Well, congratulations are in order. So you're gonna add the letters. Is it OAM at the end, right? Absolutely. How do you plan to celebrate this?
Well, it's interesting. Celebration, I celebrate life every day, and I celebrate every moment. Even saying this to my daughter, I took my granddaughter for her first swimming lessons today, and my daughter said to me, oh, I was going to bake you a cake for your first, swimming lessons. My daughter would make a card or a cake for anything. If I sneeze, she'll go, "Oh, that we need to do something for that." So my family, we are we live every moment like it is a massive celebration. So I guess it's just, yeah, there's obviously I'm not going to go out and drink a bucket of champagne. That's not going to be my thing. But I don't know. It's an every moment celebration because you're in it.
Absolutely.
And
Now,
we forget sometimes that we are in it all the time. But we need to head in this direction, and we've got an objective and we need to head there, and we forget to actually really, really immerse yourself in the experience of getting there.
absolutely. Now, I gotta ask you this, Ray. What does it feel like being Order of Australian awarded person today?
Still a bit surreal, actually. No, as I said before, I am incredibly proud and very grateful to the people that thought I was so worthy of nominating for the award. I don't know who nominated me, but I understand it was about 2 years in the making, so it's been a long considered process. Yeah, so I'm grateful and very proud.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time with us on the show today. I mean, as we conclude this profound conversation, I think we're just reminded of the power of one resilience and the impact that one individual can have on the lives of many. And I think you have just embodied all of those things and more. And I think there's a whole lot more for us to learn from, from you. But it would be remiss for me to not ask, what's next? What are we going to be looking out for in the future?
Well, what's next? Retirement? No. Well, I am considering retirement actually because I do take responsibility for my. I will always be working. Um, I would like to be able to get across more people and more people that need it. The mental health sector and to a degree, the men's health sector will appeal to a certain demographic of men or people that can afford it and that are palatable. So if you look at, language and literature and, imagery in mental health, you'll just see people. But if you look at the people that really need it, they're people in our jails, people who are living on our streets, people who are living in addiction, people that are living in drug dens. They are the people that really need it. But we kind of forget that. So I would like to be able to get across more if I can. Again, not helping, but creating environments that support good mental health, safety and wellbeing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the platform that you now have as OAM would actually be able to afford you that and be able to open up doors and conversations that many, an individual may not have been able to do that. So I think it's all coming together in due course. So thank you so
Well,
much.
I do love a stage, Prosper. Give me a stage, give me a microphone, and I'm happy.
Absolutely. But we're about to exit stage left now. I mean, obviously the curtain is closing on us, but you did really bring the house down. And I really, really appreciate the time that we spent on the call today. And for those that are watching right now, if today's discussion resonated with you, I want you to consider how Ray's journey actually mirrors the challenges that you or someone you know might actually be facing, because half of the time fish don't see the water that they're swimming in, and most of the people that are out there, they're just trying to survive, yet there is help out there, because her work exemplifies the importance of addressing mental health with empathy, and authenticity. And I just encourage you to reach out to her through her website. I will put all the links in the show notes there so that you can learn, more on how you can help those that are desperately in need for this. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show for more insightful content just like this. Until next time, bye for now.